I have this friend at work. Let's call him George. I'm so worried about him. He seems so distressed at work. When he's surrounded with people, he's a funny guy, always the first to crack a joke. But I've walked in on him a few times, sitting alone. It's as if he's not the same person. He just sits and stares into the distance. It looks like he's covering up hurt and worry with humor. I can hardly think it's the same man who gave his life to Christ just 5 weeks ago. I invited him to visit my church. And just so you know, I've invited him many times before. This time, I think he just agreed because he was tired of me nagging. George was married, but also did not regard his marriage very high. He had a beautiful daughter who he adores. All the hours he's at work or on the golf course with clients, he justifies by saying that he's doing it for his little girl. That Sunday night, the Holy Spirit worked in his life and he gave his heart to God. Man, the joy he experienced. It was a weird message. Unlikely was the title of the sermon that evening. The preacher introduced Mephibosheth in the book of Samuel. He was the grandson of King Saul. He was 5 years old. He was like most his age, bright-eyed and innocent. But one day, he was playing in the king's courtyards. News came that changed his life forever. Both his father and grandfather were killed by Philistines. Pandemonium broke loose. The custom was that every member of the household of the king shall be killed when a new king reigns. They heard David was on his way. Mephibosheth could not understand the panic because David was his father's friend. His caretaker picked him up and started running, looking for a place to hide him. In all the commotion, she accidentally dropped him, and the fall broke both his legs. In one day, he lost his grandfather, his father, his trust in his father's friend, his home, his inheritance, his legs, and his self-worth. Many years later, David remembered his promise to Jonathan to show kindness to his family. David inquired if there were still any family of Jonathan, and they told him about this crippled child who was actually only a burden. David called for him and restored him. He gave him all his grandfather's possessions and lands. He gave him servants and let him eat at the king's table. The preacher ended his sermon by pointing out that many of us also have lives that are upside down. Nothing works out. We lose our joy and peace, and we think this is how our lives will be forever. But then God remembers you and calls you. If you come, He will restore you in every way. You will experience joy and supernatural peace. When the preacher made the altar call, George was the first one to be at the front of the line. What was my mistake? I need some help to get these dreams out of my head. Just tell me how to get this fluid out of my skin. I've lost each part of my heart. The Monday morning at work, he was overflowing with joy. However, our other colleagues were not as excited and very skeptical. I knew George would need a lot of encouragement and friends to help him in his new way of living. I invited him to join us on our Wednesday night at our friendship group. He promised he would come, but never pitched. I expected him to be at church the Sunday too, but to my surprise, he didn't come to that either. I was very concerned and asked him the Monday morning if everything was okay. He assured me it was. He was just very busy. As the weeks passed, he had more and more excuses, and I could see how his joy was withering and how he was falling back into his old unhappy lifestyle. My heart just broke for him. You know, this is exactly what Peter spoke about in 1 Peter chapter 2. And you are living stones that God is building into a spiritual temple. What's more, you are His holy priests. Through the mediation of Jesus Christ, You offer spiritual sacrifices that please God. We need to be built into a spiritual family. We need to connect and build strong relationships. The pastor at our church always says that when there is a pile of loose bricks lying next to the road, it won't be long before all of them are gone. You see, it's so easy to pick up a brick and walk away with it. But when it's built in, nobody can take it, no matter what they do. You see, the thief comes only in order to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But Jesus came that we may have life and enjoy life and have it in abundance till it overflows.
Will I find some God, even if it's bad? What was my mistake?
Take Samantha as an example. When she was 18, she got involved in a destructive relationship. It wasn't long before she was addicted to drugs and alcohol. She didn't have a good family support structure, and it looked as though from that point she didn't have much of a future either. But God had a plan with her. Our youth group was involved in street evangelism and picked up a very badly beaten, high on drugs, just skin and bone body. She never experienced love before. Her perspective of love was very different. She could not believe that these total strangers were caring for her week after week for so long. She was so weak that she could not talk to them. They tirelessly cared for her, and when she was better, told her about Jesus' love. To make a long story short, she gave her life to God and immediately got involved in several groups at church. The temptations came again and again, and many times she almost slipped, but her spiritual family helped her and walked a road with her. She is now my secretary, and if we ask her what kept her on track up to now, she won't waver one bit to say, being built in. Guys, get involved in a group. Make sure you have a spiritual family and a good support structure. Don't give Satan a chance to steal you. Get involved. Have yourself built into a spiritual home. Be built in and experience the love of God and the love of your spiritual family.
How to get this fluid out of my skin? I need some help to get these dreams out of my head. It's getting black and dry. What was my mistake? What was my mistake?